It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. You there? Hey, Blackie. Go serve. The words cracked through the ballroom like a glass dropped on marble. Laughter followed instantly, sharp, careless, rehearsed. The kind of laughter that didn't come from humor, but from certainty. Certainty that the room belonged to them. Certainty that no one would challenge it. The gala was everything old money loved to display. Crystal chandeliers spilling warm gold across polished floors. Women in silk and satin, men in tailored tuxedos, diamonds flashing like frozen tears with every turn of a wrist. A room built to celebrate power and to remind everyone who wasn't supposed to have it. Near the center of it all stood a black woman in an ivory evening gown. Clean lines. No excessive jewelry. Elegant, restrained, intentional. She didn't match the room's hunger for attention, and that was exactly why she stood out. Her phone was pressed to her ear. In front of her, a white woman in a deep blue gown leaned forward, finger raised, laughter still spilling from her mouth. She looked like someone who had never been told no. Behind her, a man with silver hair and a smug grin clapped once, amused. Others followed. A ripple of approval disguised as humor. Phones came out. Slowly at first. Then all at once. This wasn't discomfort to them. This was entertainment. The black woman's eyes moved calmly across the faces now turned toward her. Some were laughing. Some were filming. Some were smiling the way people smile when they're relieved they're not the target. No one stepped in. No one corrected the moment. She said nothing to the woman mocking her. Instead, she spoke quietly into the phone. Yes, she said. A pause. Her gaze lifted, steady, unreadable. Cancel the deal. The woman in blue laughed harder. Did you hear her? She said to the crowd. She thinks she's important. More laughter. Louder this time. The black woman lowered her phone, but didn't put it away. The screen glowed briefly in her hand before dimming. For just a second, the number was visible, 9 digits, clean and final. $900 million. No one noticed. They were too busy enjoying themselves. The orchestra resumed, strings swelling awkwardly as if trying to smooth over the tension that only one side of the room felt. Waiters froze mid-step, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. The woman in blue turned to her friends, basking in the moment. Honestly, she said, waving a hand dismissively, they let anyone in these days. The black woman took a single step forward. Not aggressive. Not defensive. Controlled. Her presence shifted something subtle in the air. A few laughs died off. One phone lowered. She met the woman's eyes not with anger, not with embarrassment, but with a calm so complete it felt misplaced in a room built on noise. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories sparked change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The woman in blue tilted her head, confused now. Annoyed. Do you need help finding the kitchen? She sneered. Security. At the word, 2 guards shifted at the edge of the room. They hesitated. Something about the scene didn't feel right anymore, though none of them could explain why. The black woman finally spoke softly, evenly. I was invited, she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't plead. It didn't defend itself. It stated a fact. The woman in blue scoffed. By who? The black woman's lips curved, just slightly. Not a smile. Not yet. By the people whose money built this room, she replied. A murmur passed through the crowd. Someone frowned. Another glanced at the event program. The orchestra faltered again, a violin string screeching before correcting itself. The woman in blue opened her mouth to laugh but stopped. Because somewhere, deep in the room, a phone began to vibrate. Then another. And another. Assistants checked screens. A man near the bar went pale. A woman whispered urgently to her husband. The laughter thinned, stretched, and finally broke apart into confusion. The black woman looked down at her phone once more. A single message glowed on the screen. Confirmed. Effective immediately. She slipped the phone back into her clutch. The room, still glittering and loud just moments ago, felt suddenly smaller. Tighter. As if the walls themselves were waiting. And no one there, not the laughing guests, not the woman in blue, not the family at the center of the gala, had any idea that what she had just cancelled wasn't just a deal. It was their future. The laughter didn't stop right away. It thinned, warped, turned uneven, but it didn't disappear. Not yet. People at the surrounding tables leaned closer to one another, whispering with the excitement of those who sensed drama but didn't yet feel danger. This was still amusing to them. Still something to watch. Still safely happening to someone else. The woman in blue reclaimed the center of attention with ease. She smoothed the front of her gown, lifted her chin, and smiled as if the moment had gone exactly as planned. Honestly, she said again, louder now, projecting confidence back into the room, you'd think with all the money floating around tonight, they could at least manage the guest list. A few guests chuckled on cue. Others nodded, grateful for the permission to relax. The orchestra found its rhythm again, the violins stretching a little too brightly, as if trying to overwrite what had just happened. The black woman remained where she was. Still. Upright. Unmoved. Her calm was beginning to unsettle people, not because they understood it, but because they couldn't explain it. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't leaving. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even defending herself. She simply existed, fully and unapologetically, in a room that had already decided she didn't belong. A waiter passed behind her, tray trembling slightly. His eyes flicked toward her face, then away, as if looking too long might cost him his job. Near the bar, a man in a grey tuxedo frowned at his phone, refreshing his screen again and again, his earlier amusement fading into irritation. At the head table, a silver-haired man, the kind whose name was printed on buildings, leaned toward his wife. "What's taking so long?" he murmured. "We're supposed to announce tonight." She waved him off, still smiling. "Relax. These things always take a moment." But the certainty in her voice had softened. Across the room, someone whispered a name. Quietly. Uncertainly. Another person asked them to repeat it. A program booklet was flipped open. A finger traced down a list of sponsors. The black woman felt it before she saw it, the shift. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the subtle change that happens when confidence begins to crack. When people start looking not at her, but at each other. Phones buzzed again. This time, no one laughed. She turned slightly, catching the reflection of herself in a mirrored column, ivory dress unwrinkled, shoulders relaxed, eyes clear. The room behind her looked different now. Smaller. Less impressive. Like a stage set once the lights began to fail. The woman in blue noticed it too. Her smile tightened. "Why are you still standing here?" she snapped, irritation finally bleeding through. "Do you enjoy causing scenes?" The black woman met her gaze. "No," she said calmly. "I enjoy clarity." The word landed strangely. Not sharp. Not loud. Just precise. Around them, conversations stalled. The orchestra slowed, the conductor hesitating mid-gesture. A man near the exit slipped his phone into his pocket and straightened his jacket, suddenly eager to be somewhere else. The woman in blue scoffed, but there was a flicker of doubt now. Security, she said again, louder. I won't ask twice. The guards took a step forward and then stopped. One of them pressed a finger to his earpiece, listening. His expression changed, just slightly. The other guard glanced at him, confused. The black woman said nothing. She didn't need to. Whatever had been set in motion was already moving, far beyond the ballroom, far beyond this moment of misplaced laughter and borrowed power. And for the first time that evening, the room began to understand something fundamental. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a consequence. The family at the center of the gala had always believed nights like this were theirs by default. They had inherited that belief along with their money. The Witmore family name floated through the room like an unspoken credential. It didn't need to be announced. It was stitched into the place cards, the donor walls, the hushed respect of staff who learned early not to ask questions. Old money didn't introduce itself. It expected recognition. Margaret Witmore sat perfectly upright at the head table, blue gown immaculate, posture trained by decades of being deferred to. She had built her reputation not through business, but through presence, charity boards, social circles, influence that moved quietly but decisively. People mistook that for power. Her husband, Charles, leaned back beside her, swirling his drink, watching the room with the detached confidence of a man who had never worried about consequences landing on him personally. He was the face of the family's legacy: real estate, private equity stakes, partnerships that survived on perception as much as performance. Tonight mattered to him. Very few people in the room knew just how much. Across the table, their son laughed too loudly at a joke no one remembered telling. He had perfected that laugh, carefree, entitled, unbothered. It was the sound of someone who had never needed to calculate risk. Their daughter sat absorbed in her phone, scrolling, bored, confident the evening would end exactly as all the others did: applause, praise, reassurance. This gala wasn't just a celebration. It was a countdown. In less than an hour, they were supposed to announce the deal. The one that would quiet the rumors. The one that would stabilize the family's future. $900 million structured, leveraged, precise. A partnership that would secure them for another generation. The Witmores had told everyone it was done. They believed it was. What they didn't know, what no one in the room knew, was that the deal rested on a single signature. One decision. One person who had insisted on privacy so complete that even the Witmores' inner circle had never seen her face. They had negotiated through lawyers, assistants, encrypted calls. It had never occurred to them that the woman standing calmly on the ballroom floor, now being mocked and dismissed, could be the axis their future turned on. Why would it? To them, power looked a certain way. It wore the right colors. It spoke at the right volume. It laughed when it was supposed to. It didn't stand quietly while being insulted. Margaret glanced around the room again, irritation growing beneath her polished smile. Something felt off. Too many phones. Too much whispering. The attention had shifted, and she didn't like not knowing why. Charles, she murmured under her breath, why is everyone acting strange? He checked his phone again, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Probably nothing, he said, though his tone lacked conviction. These things get dramatic. But even as he said it, a knot formed in his chest. Across the room, the black woman remained exactly where she was, composed, unhurried, untouched by the Witmore's world of assumptions. She wasn't watching them anymore. She was waiting. And the Witmores, so used to being the ones waited on, had no idea they were already too late. The truth about her had always lived in places rooms like this never looked. Not on donor walls. Not in society pages. Not spoken aloud over champagne flutes and orchestral interludes. She had learned early that real power didn't announce itself. It moved quietly, deliberately, behind layers of distance and discretion. So she built her life that way, out of sight, out of reach, impossible to reduce to a headline or a face. Years earlier, she had sat in offices where people spoke past her, around her, over her. Rooms where her ideas were praised only after someone else repeated them. Meetings where she was mistaken for an assistant, a consultant, a temporary presence. Each time, she adjusted not by shrinking, but by remembering. Remembering that the loudest voice was rarely the most important one. She built her company the same way she built her reputation, patiently, invisibly, and with absolute control. No interviews. No panels. No glossy magazine profiles. Contracts spoke louder than publicity ever could. And when her name appeared, it appeared only where it mattered, on documents that moved money, redirected markets, ended conversations. By the time she reached the level she was at now, anonymity wasn't an accident. It was armor. That was why the Witmores had never seen her. Their lawyers had spoken to her lawyers. Their representatives had negotiated with her team. Every detail of the $900 million deal had been vetted, modeled, secured except for the one variable they assumed would never change. Respect. She had come to the gala not for validation, not for spectacle, but for closure. A final courtesy. A human presence to accompany a partnership that, until tonight, she had believed was built on mutual understanding. Standing there now, listening to the soft chaos ripple through the room, she felt none of the anger they expected. What she felt was clarity. Her phone vibrated once more in her clutch. A short message. Clean. Professional. Funds withdrawn. Legal notified. Counterpart alerted. That was it. Years of planning undone not by a miscalculation, not by market forces, but by a moment that revealed exactly who she was dealing with. She lifted her gaze and let it rest, briefly, on the Witmore family table. On Margaret's tightening smile. On Charles's rigid posture. On the children's confusion as they sensed something slipping beyond their grasp. They were still trying to understand what had changed. They hadn't realized yet that the shift had happened the moment they decided she didn't matter. The orchestra fell silent again, this time without instruction. Conversations stopped. The room hovered in an uncomfortable pause, waiting for anyone to restore the illusion. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed the fabric of her gown, and took a measured breath. This wasn't revenge. It was alignment. When she finally moved, it wasn't toward the exits or the guards or the woman who had mocked her. It was toward the center of the room, into the space they believed they owned. And for the first time that evening, the Witmores felt it. The presence they had dismissed. The power they had misjudged. The woman they should have recognized long before now. The first visible crack appeared at the head table. Charles Witmore's phone vibrated again, longer this time. Not a notification. A call. He declined it without thinking, jaw tight, eyes scanning the room as if the answer might be written on someone's face. Around him, laughter had thinned into scattered noise, no longer synchronized, no longer confident. Margaret leaned closer. "Who keeps calling you?" "Later," he muttered, though his voice betrayed him. He checked his screen again. 3 missed calls. One message flagged urgent. Across the ballroom, the black woman had stopped moving. She stood still, perfectly centered, as if the room had been arranged around her rather than the other way around. Her hands rested calmly at her sides. No phone now. No gestures. Nothing that looked like action. And yet, action was everywhere. At a side table, a junior partner from a private equity firm frowned hard at his screen, then excused himself too quickly. Near the bar, a donor laughed once too loud, then went quiet as he reread the same email. Assistants whispered into sleeves. A man who had been filming lowered his phone, suddenly aware that recording might not be wise. The woman in blue noticed the shift and didn't like it. "What is going on?" she snapped, turning toward one of the event coordinators. "Why does it feel like a fire drill in here?" The coordinator opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes flicked toward the black woman before darting away. I'm not sure, she said. We're checking something. Checking something. The phrase spread through the room like a weak excuse that no one believed. Charles finally answered his phone, turning his back slightly, voice low. Yes. What? His shoulders stiffened almost immediately. What do you mean withdrawn? He hissed. That doesn't make sense. We were finalizing. He stopped. Listened. His free hand clenched around the edge of the table. Margaret watched him closely now, smile gone. Charles? He didn't answer. Across the room, the black woman exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in completion. This was the part no one ever saw. The part where decisions became irreversible. She remembered the meeting where she had insisted on a single clause, unilateral withdrawal, no explanation required, effective immediately. Her legal team had raised eyebrows. The Witmore's representatives had waved it through, eager, confident, distracted by numbers they assumed were already theirs. They had signed. Charles ended the call and stared at his phone as if it had betrayed him. This is ridiculous, he said finally, forcing a laugh that didn't land. There's been a mistake. But even as he said it, another vibration came. Then another. Margaret's phone joined the chorus. Then their sons. Then their daughters, who looked up from her screen for the first time all evening, confusion turning to unease. What's happening? She asked. No one answered her. The woman in blue took a step forward, voice sharp, desperate to reassert control. Enough, she said. This is absurd. Who are you? She pointed directly at the black woman now. Do you think you can just walk in here and disrupt everything? The black woman met her gaze. I didn't disrupt anything, she said evenly. I ended it. The room went quiet, not the polite silence of attention, but the heavy silence of realization beginning to form. Somewhere in the back, a whisper finally broke through. That's her. The words didn't need to be loud. They only needed to be true. The reaction didn't arrive all at once. It rippled. Like a fracture spreading through glass. Phones were no longer buzzing discreetly, now they were lighting up, vibrating hard enough to draw attention. People stopped pretending not to look. Faces tilted downward in unison, brows knitting, smiles evaporating as messages were reread again and again, as if repetition might change the meaning. At the head table, Charles Witmore stood abruptly, chair scraping too loudly against the marble floor. Conversations around him died mid-sentence. Every instinct in the room knew this wasn't the kind of interruption that ended well. What exactly does terminated mean? He snapped into his phone, voice tight. You can't just know, listen to me, this was agreed upon. He stopped talking. Listened. The color drained from his face so quickly it was almost theatrical. Margaret rose more slowly, dignity fighting panic. Charles, she said under her breath, you're causing a scene. But the scene had already found them. Across the ballroom, a donor quietly slipped his arm from his wife's and headed for the exit without explanation. Near the stage, a representative from a partner firm closed his laptop, expression unreadable, and followed. One by one, the people who understood what was happening began to move, not dramatically, not publicly, but decisively. Distance was being created. The woman in blue felt it slipping through her fingers. Someone tell me what's going on, she demanded, her voice rising. This is our event. No one answered her. An assistant approached the head table, pale, clutching a tablet like a life raft. Sir, she whispered to Charles, we've received confirmation from legal. The withdrawal is complete. Margaret's breath caught. Complete, she echoed. That's not possible. The assistant didn't argue. She didn't need to. The black woman watched it all unfold with measured stillness. This was the moment people always imagined incorrectly, the moment of triumph, of satisfaction, of visible victory. But what she felt wasn't pleasure. It was inevitability. She had seen this before, in boardrooms and conference calls, in markets that shifted without warning. Power didn't explode. It recalibrated. And once it did, everything that relied on the old balance collapsed quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. The guards at the edge of the room exchanged glances again. One spoke softly into his earpiece. The other took a step back, not away from her, but away from the Witmores. The woman in blue noticed. Her confidence fractured into something sharper. "This is insane," she said, pointing again, desperation leaking through her anger. "You think you can do this and just walk away?" The black woman turned to face her fully now. "I already have," she said. The simplicity of the statement landed harder than any insult. Around them, whispers sharpened into clarity. "That's the investor." "No, she's the one. She owns the deal." The words spread, unstoppable now, rearranging loyalties in real time. The same people who had laughed earlier avoided her gaze, suddenly aware of how quickly the room had judged the wrong person. Charles Witmore sank back into his chair, phone slipping from his hand onto the table. Margaret stood frozen beside him, the architecture of her certainty finally collapsing. The black woman adjusted her clutch and took a single step forward. Not toward them. Past them. And the room parted without being asked. The reveal didn't come with an announcement. It came with recognition. A man near the sponsor wall stiffened, eyes locked on the black woman as if a puzzle piece had finally snapped into place. He leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered something urgent. Her expression changed instantly. Not curiosity, confirmation. "That's her," someone murmured. The words moved faster than the music ever had, passing from table to table in fragments. Not loud enough to be dramatic. Loud enough to be irreversible. "She's the one behind it. The signature. The money." Margaret Witmore heard it and felt her breath falter. She turned slowly, scanning the room, searching for reassurance in faces that had always reflected her authority back to her. What she found instead was avoidance. People looking away. People pretending to check messages they had already read. Charles stood again, this time unsteady. "This is ridiculous," he said, forcing his voice into firmness. "You don't just erase $900 million because of a misunderstanding." The black woman stopped. She turned, not sharply, not dramatically, but with the patience of someone deciding whether a conversation was worth finishing. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," she said. "It was information." The simplicity of it cut deeper than anger ever could. The woman in blue took a step forward, face flushed, dignity unraveling. "You humiliated us," she said, accusation trembling beneath her words. "In front of everyone." The black woman regarded her calmly. "No," she replied. "You did that yourself." A hush settled over the room. This time, no one tried to fill it. Margaret finally spoke, voice thin. "Who are you?" The black woman held her gaze, not with pride, not with triumph, but with something steadier. "I'm the person you decided didn't belong," she said. "And the person you needed most." The truth landed with weight. Around them, the room adjusted in real time. Postures shifted. Alliances recalculated. A few guests took discreet steps backward, as if distance alone might absolve them of their earlier laughter. Charles swallowed hard. "We can fix this," he said quickly. "Let's talk privately." The black woman shook her head once. "Power doesn't need privacy," she said. "Only accountability." She turned away again, and this time no one tried to stop her. The orchestra didn't resume. The chandeliers seemed dimmer, as if the room itself had lost confidence in what it was meant to celebrate. As she walked, the crowd parted instinctively, not out of fear, but recognition. They finally saw her. And the Witmores finally understood something they had never learned how to survive. Being seen too late. The room didn't erupt. It recalibrated. People who had once leaned forward now leaned back. Conversations didn't resume, they dissolved. What replaced them wasn't chaos, but calculation. The kind that happens when everyone realizes the hierarchy they trusted no longer applies. Margaret Witmore broke first. She stepped forward, smoothing her gown as if fabric alone could restore order. Her voice softened, trained for damage control. "Let's not be hasty," she said, addressing the room as much as the woman in front of her. "This has all been unfortunate. But misunderstandings happen. Surely we can speak privately." A few guests nodded instinctively, grateful for the familiarity of negotiation. Of civility. Of pretending things could return to the way they were. The black woman stopped walking. She turned not because she needed to, but because the moment required it. "Private conversations are for people who respect each other in public," she said calmly. The words landed without force, yet no one missed them. Margaret's smile faltered. "You're enjoying this," she accused, desperation creeping through the polish. "Making an example of us?" The black woman shook her head. "No," she replied. "I'm correcting an assumption." Charles stepped in, voice sharp now. "This deal was vital," he said. "You're jeopardizing livelihoods. Entire teams. You don't get to walk away without consequence." She met his gaze evenly. "I didn't walk away," she said. "I chose not to stand beside people who confuse power with permission." A murmur rippled through the room, not agreement, not dissent, but recognition. The woman in blue tried one last time, her voice cracking. "You think you're better than us?" The black woman paused. "No," she said. "I think I'm accountable. There's a difference." Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. Somewhere near the exit, a donor exhaled slowly, as if realizing he'd been holding his breath for too long. Others checked their watches, suddenly eager to leave a room that no longer protected them. The black woman adjusted her clutch again, posture relaxed, unburdened. "This wasn't personal," she added, almost gently. "It was structural." With that, she turned and continued forward. No one blocked her path. No one spoke. The room opened, not because she demanded it but because the truth had. Behind her, the Witmores stood surrounded by chandeliers and wealth that suddenly felt decorative. Hollow. Ahead of her, the night waited quiet, unassuming, unafraid. And for the first time that evening, she walked without being watched as an outsider. She walked as exactly who she had always been. The night didn't follow her out. It stayed behind, trapped under chandeliers, buried in murmurs, clinging to the people who had mistaken inheritance for immunity. Outside, the air was cool and clean. The city moved the way it always did, indifferent to gala doors and shattered illusions. Headlights passed. A siren hummed somewhere in the distance. Life, uninterrupted. She paused on the steps, not to look back, but to breathe. Behind the glass, the Witmores stood frozen in the aftermath of a truth they had never learned how to negotiate. Phones rang unanswered. Assistants whispered in tight circles. Donors slipped away quietly, recalculating loyalties with the efficiency of people who had done this before. By morning, headlines would soften the language. By noon, markets would not. The consequences were already in motion. Contracts dissolved. Credit tightened. A foundation quietly postponed its next event. A board called an emergency meeting that would last hours and solve nothing. The family's name, once a shortcut, became a question mark. She knew how this part went. She had seen it enough times to understand that collapse rarely looked like punishment. It looked like silence. Like doors that stopped opening. Like invitations that never arrived. Her phone vibrated once more. A final confirmation. Accounts reallocated. A line item redirected not back into the noise of the room she'd left, but forward. Into scholarships. Into housing initiatives. Into a fund named after a woman who had taught her that dignity was non-negotiable. She typed a brief reply. Approved. Then she put the phone away. A car pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out, respectful, unassuming. She nodded and slid into the back seat, the city folding around her as the door closed. Inside the ballroom, someone finally tried to laugh. It didn't work. The orchestra packed up without playing another note. Staff began clearing glasses that no one had finished. The chandeliers glowed on, obedient and empty, illuminating a room that no longer knew what it was celebrating. As the car moved into traffic, she looked ahead. Tomorrow would bring questions. Explanations demanded by people who had ignored her until the cost of doing so became clear. She would answer some. Decline others. She always did. What mattered had already been decided. Not with raised voices. Not with spectacle. But with one choice made at the exact moment respect was denied. Power, she knew, didn't need to be seen to be real. It only needed to be exercised once. And tonight, it had been.